Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dr. Scott Stoll, co-founder of the Plantrician Project. And today I'm coming to you from Salt Lake City. I'm actually here speaking at a national convention for occupational medicine. That's one of the things that I love is that lifestyle medicine and regenerative medicine open up opportunities to reach new groups of people with this incredibly scientific-driven message that is really connected to every part of life and healthcare. And this afternoon, we have this privileged opportunity to have a conversation about sleep. Last year, I was on a cruise, the Holistic Holiday at Sea, and I was on a panel about athletic performance. And they asked me, Dr. Stoll, what is the most important aspect of recovery for athletes or for individuals? And the conversation that day had really largely been around food. And I kind of changed the conversation by saying the most important aspect is sleep. And we're going to talk about that today, how important sleep is, not only for recovery, but for prevention and for optimization of our lives. Well, I just want to welcome you in as we get ready for our evening and our education series today. Again, the Plantrician Project was a mission-oriented project that was started 14 years ago by myself, Tom Dunham, and Susan Benegas, really with the intention of reaching healthcare professionals with the incredibly important and urgent message that a plant-based plate is the most powerful way to prevent, suspend, and reverse disease. We are evolving as we just launched our last conference, finishing up in Palm Desert just 2 weeks ago, and expanding our message and our mission around the power of the plate to include all of the voices that impact that plate, and that plate then becomes a transformative force around the world. I just want to highlight a couple of our initiatives. If you are not a part of those, please join us. In 2 weeks, we have our Health Equity Conference, the HELP Conference, which really was an action-oriented conference designed to reach out and connect and bring immediate assistance to those communities that are at risk, under-resourced communities, both here in the United States and abroad, that don't have access to healthy food, and they don't have access to the support, medical services that they need to transform their lives. So please join us in Jupiter, Florida, October 10th through the 12th. It's really an important and essential conference, and we'd love for you to be there. And then also we have Plantrician University, our free platform for every healthcare professional, student, and faculty member in the world that we make available. So if you have medical school students, if you know of nursing students, physical therapy students, dental students, chiropractic students, anyone, please share that resource with them. We've created that to empower and educate them in parallel with their allopathic education. So this evening, it is really our honor to have a privilege to talk about sleep with a national expert, Dr. Wendy Bazilian. And this evening is sponsored by Love One Today. Love One Today is a leading source of the healthiest reasons and tastiest ways to enjoy fresh avocados. Backed by science, Love One Today provides turnkey solutions that make it easy for health professionals to stay on top of the latest health research and confidently recommend fresh avocados to patients. And I love avocados. We have avocados continually in my home. I just had some guacamole before this education seminar. And as I was just reading that, I was remembering, Wendy, that my daughter loves to make a kale salad, and she always slices fresh avocados on top of our kale salad. So it is a part of our home. I just want to give Wendy a proper introduction before we dive into sleep. Wendy Bazilian is a doctor of public health, registered dietitian and nutritionist, ACSM certified exercise physiologist. We have so much in common, Wendy. She's the host of 1000 Working Minutes podcast, known for her ability to bring real-world strategies and real science to life. Wendy blends expertise and enthusiasm to inspire healthy living around the country. She is the author of Eat Clean, Stay Lean series, and Superfood RX Diet, has contributed to New York Times bestseller Superfood RX, James Beard nominated Golden Door Cooks at Home. With 25 years of experience, she works with diverse clients from CEOs to celebrities, athletes, artists, and families. helping them optimize their health through food and movement. Wendy is a national media expert, frequent national TV guest, expert, and respected speaker. She's recognized with the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics Distinguished Lecture Award for her contribution to the field of nutrition. She strives to make nutrition approachable, enjoyable, and meaningful in everyday life. She's also a spokesperson for Avocados Love One Today, and she shared with me that she serves as a volunteer at her children's school and has led change inside of that school to make it one of the healthiest schools in America. So with that, Wendy, welcome. We are really honored to have you tonight, and I'm excited to jump in on our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I am proud of that last accolade that we got America's Healthiest Schools recognition, not because of the recognition so much as that we were doing things well and we have a ways to go, but I am proud of that. Thank you. And I'm so happy to be with you, Scott, and with our attendees, our audience today to have this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. And about such an important topic that I think often gets missed in lifestyle medicine. You know, all of us are impassioned about food. We eat 2,000 pounds of food a year, and it really is a foundation of health. And you and I love movement, and it's fun to talk about movement. But sleep often is forgotten, and it is one of the most important aspects of human health. And so many things fall apart if we don't sleep. Sleep has a profound effect on every system in the body. When we don't sleep, our body recognizes that as a stressor, and cortisol goes up, which drives unhealthy eating habits. And so it's really connected and rooted more deeply than we might realize to our health and the vibrancy of our lives. And so I'm excited to dive in on this topic with you, Wendy. And I want to invite all of our panelists, all of our attendees. You know, if you have questions, down at the bottom, you'll see the Q&A bubble. Please put your questions in there for Wendy and I. We'll get to as many questions as we possibly can during this webinar. We want this to be a conversation with you all as colleagues, not only to understand the science of sleep, but really also how to assist the people in our lives with getting a better night's sleep amidst all of the challenges that we have today. So Wendy, why don't you just give me a little bit of history on your background, how you ended up where you are today, coming out of, we had a conversation before this, very unique undergraduate that led you in a kind of circuitous way into nutrition, because I think it's relevant and our audience would love to hear that story.
Well, thank you. Well, it was circuitous, as you know, and you're, as many of us. I find that very few people, sort of set their sights on one thing and just march right for it. But my route came through, well, I used to say like the back door and straight into the kitchen. I've always loved to eat, and I've always been good at science, but I didn't start looking at science as a career option for some peculiar reason. And I really believed in, and still do, liberal arts. And so my original degrees are in liberal arts, in Spanish language and literature, in Latin American studies. But the connection to nutrition started very, very early, because I did go to Tufts University, which is renowned for nutrition science. I did go there very specifically because Jean Mayer, who was the president of the university at the time, had advised numerous presidential administrations, on nutrition policy at the time. And specifically because I knew I was going to be on the dorm meal plan. And in the dorms, it was said, and someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but it was said at the time it was the first university to implement salad bars in the dorm cafeterias. And I swear to you on my honor, that was a very compelling reason, aside from and in addition to the academic rigor, the diversity of the class, that they sort of shoved you to go study abroad in your junior year, all the things that brought me to Tufts. Was, one important one was the salad bar. And I always have loved plant-based eating. So that was always something that was a heavy passion. But sort of my cosmopolitan magazine, so to speak, that I would get in at the university, I would subscribe to the New England Journal. I would go to, I'd get the Journal of the American Dietetic Association at the time. It's since been called something, it's now, it has a different name and it's been reframed over the years. But that was my origin in the academic sense. And then I went in to get a master's, and which led me then to my doctoral degree. I studied public health in a research project in Northeast Brazil, where I was working on a public health campaign for reinvigorating maternal health and child health through breastfeeding campaigns in a very, very indigent part of the world. And that's where sort of the connection started happening. Notably, I had to learn Portuguese to do that. But I started connecting the dots, and sort of public health, global health, and the impact on eating that is cultural, economics, it's political, it's anthropological, it's history, it's all the elements really drove me toward a doctorate in public health. All the other elements that make up a healthy lifestyle and how we got to sleep today is that I'm a very numbers-oriented person. And if we look at the great equalizer, and that is time, we have 1,440 minutes in our day. And if we look at the science on athletic recovery, like you said, and the science has been coming for cardiovascular disease and virtually every chronic disease, sleep plays a role. And if you've ever heard that magical, and we'll talk about it today, 7 to 9 hours, for optimizing health or supporting good health, that's about 440 minutes. So I've been teaching about it. I've been looking at the impact on sleep on your waking minutes. Hence my podcast, 1,000 Waking Minutes, and the healthy choices that we make during our waking minutes. And the interesting thing is science sort of supports, what you do in your rest hours highly supports how you choose and show up in your waking hours. So that's my short story. I'll stop there so we can really dive
Oh, I love
into
that.
sleep, but that's where I come from.
I love it. It's it really tells me you just have a curious mind that's always looking to answer questions and following the pathway of science. And we can start in lots of different kind of origin places, but if we follow that path of good science, we end up at the same location. And it's really that simple, basic recommendation really comes back to what we see in the blue zones. It's what we put on our plate, how we live, the community we're connected to, how much we move, how we sleep, how we're embraced in love. All of those things are the essential aspects of human health.
Yeah, interesting. You bring up the blue zones. Before the blue zones were the blue zones, I mean, the science and all the work that's been done. Loma Linda University is where I got my doctoral degree. So I was able to situate myself at Loma Linda and work with some of the top scientists in the plant-based eating sphere during that time. So now I can proudly say, I went to school in a blue zone, the only one in the United States, although we're making inroads. The Blue Zones Project, I think, is showing up in some interesting communities in our nation now, as well, as I'm sure you're aware. But the whole idea of those sort of 9 tenets that the blue zones have, or when we're looking at the impact of sleep as a lifestyle factor in overall health, which you sort of queued up at the beginning here, the American Heart Association has recently sort of identified sleep as one of the essential 8. They call it life's essential 8. And just recently, in the last couple of years, added it as a criteria, as one of the factors. And it's a great tool that I'd love to tell you to talk a little bit about, if some of your audience may know about it and some may not. But it's sort of a checklist that is a research tool as well as a clinical tool that you can assess cardiovascular risk. And sleep was just recently, because of the mounting evidence, sort of put on that list. And recommendations coming, because sleep impacts the others, but sleep in itself has impact on reducing risk of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, let's dive into that. In fact, the editor in chief of our journal, Dr. Kim Williams, is the past president of the American College of Cardiology. And he always talks about that calculator and says it's one of the most important things that a physician or even a family member, church can recommend to their patients just to assess their risk. And you're right, they added sleep onto that calculator because it is essential. And
Yes.
let's just dive into that and maybe answer the question, why did the AHA elevate sleep to one of the core cardiovascular metrics? And then we can dive a little deeper too, Wendy, in understanding some of the physiologic disruptions that occur when we're not sleeping that would contribute to the progression or advancement of cardiovascular disease.
Sure. I mean, the reason it got on the list was not because, it's a buzzword, even though it is, and people are highly fatigued and so many are suffering, insufficient sleep at times, but because the evidence is there. The evidence has been mounting and the evidence is there. Primarily, there's many different types of sleep research that is done that are done in the field, but primarily on the question of duration of sleep. Sort of the American Heart Association recommends 7 to 9 hours, depending on what is being looked at, more for different groups. So someone who may be, recovering from injury, or children, that's different, but for adults in general. And it's a risk factor, and it's because largely based on epidemiological research, but also some trials and some controlled trials now, looking at different nutrients that impact sleep, looking at the impact of sleep restriction, the looking at functional effects, looking at waking up periods, how quickly you fall asleep versus stay asleep, how deep the sleep is. I mean, not to mention, maybe we'll dive in a little bit later, monitoring and the new kind of technology that sort of helps us out as the scientists are digging in one angle, that we as a population can help with some of our tracking tools now. But it's really about duration of sleep really showed up, and the regularity of the habit. Like, are we consistently night to night, or are we sort of, burning the midnight oil 5 nights a week and trying to catch up on the weekend? Those kind of studies had really been mounting enough to warrant, American Heart Association, through their big committee, it's a big group of advisors, specialists in the field, to sort of compile and assess and review the literature to say, this warrants us adding this to the list. That was in 2022, just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I have lots of follow-up questions on that. One of them I think is important. Outside of the direct physiologic impacts of not sleeping or getting that good, sleep architecture that you mentioned, the deep sleep, the slow wave regenerative sleep. When we don't sleep, it also activates cravings and hunger signals that can lead to unhealthy choices. Can you maybe dive in a little bit on that and help people understand, there's multiple ways in which unhealthy sleep really impacts our health?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And there's a lot being done right now in the field, looking at a variety of angles where sleep is impacted. And some of them have been from sort of the sleep restricted studies. Ones we've probably put ourselves on these a few times. If you've ever had like 4 to 6 hours of sleep in a night, you're a sample size of one. Not hardly worth the peer review, but you've probably experienced some of this. But what researchers have found that when that happens over the course of several days, things like appetite regulation hormones change, and I can dive into these a little bit more. Glucose and insulin metabolism changes during our waking hours, really, really critical. Some of our choices will change. Some of us call it like the craving effect, but the choices that we make may change, and it puts us at increased cardiometabolic risk. So when we look at things like appetite hormones, researchers look at the hunger and satiety cues. Many of you, I imagine most, have heard of ghrelin and leptin, but those appetite hormones get impaired. They sort of get mixed signals. And it probably has an evolutionary basis in in orientation. We get more hunger cues if we're underslept. The ghrelin goes up. I always think ghrelin growling. Our stomach is growling because we probably had to stay up. It wasn't a choice thing. It was, we had to keep running or keep going or, forging on in our sort of survival strategy. And our turn off signal gets a little more sluggish. It's not that it goes away altogether, and there's different things that go in tandem and are concomitant with maybe overweight and obesity and other factors. But we get a little bit, and think about like the perfect storm for eating more. Hunger goes up, your turn off signal goes down, not to mention some metabolic irregularity. So starting there, I mean, I think that the tools that we have, the measurements, the smart scientists, I'm not doing the science, I'm just reading it avidly like you do, that they're able to identify some of these things that happen when people have prolonged or consistent nights of restricted sleep or not optimal sleep or recovery or rest, I should say. Rest and restoration. I like to use those words sometimes because sleep is one thing, but getting, good rest and restoration is really the key to a good night's sleep.
Yeah, it truly is. And I'd like to maybe go down one more layer too on the appetite, that it's common for people to have cravings. I know, prolactin gets disrupted overnight, and that can contribute to carbohydrate cravings. And so maybe if you can just go down one more layer on, what happens when people are having sleep disruption or short sleep cycles, and they're craving these snacks, and the types of foods that they may eat and how that impacts their health.
Yeah, there has been some research. So there's a few, just like you said, there are other hormones that can come to play and sort of play chemically on the brain and on our signals and sort of misfire or be miswired temporarily. Also, I think the blood sugar metabolic cycle gets impaired. So insulin sensitivity goes down and the glucose regulation gets impaired, making it harder to get the energy, because the energy is in the cell, right? I mean, having the glucose there doesn't give you the energy. It's once we get in the cell and we can make the energy out of it. So all that impairment can lead to, a signal cascade that increases then hunger again. Also, some of our choices that are made become less positive nutritionally. So there has been some showing, of people making choices towards, higher carbohydrate or poorer nutritional choices. Whereas on the flip side, there's some more recent research, particularly some really recent research that was just published in June on fruits and vegetables, and the connection of fiber, fruits and vegetables in general, and also good fats on helping with better sleep. So the choices we make can help, do the things that we know metabolically, but then they impact sleep in a number of ways. And people are, researchers are making the connection there as well. And clinically, these things, help us sort of simplify a practical approach. We can't generalize the research. We all know that completely, but it does support sort of food first approaches to making quality nutrient choices to help impact and improve sleep. Whereas we're starting to see that some of the very things that poor sleep does, it becomes a cycle. It's very cyclical. I think that some of the research papers have even used that in their title, the cycle, the negative cycle that happens of the impact of food and sleep.
Yeah, let's talk about that cycle, because I was just thinking about that as you were talking, that it really becomes this downward spiral. You don't get a good night's sleep. It's a stressor on the body. Cortisol goes up. You start craving snacks. There's a disruption of hormones. Leptin and ghrelin are disrupted. You're eating unhealthy foods, feeling tired, not exercising. You get more system-wide, including neuroinflammation. You don't feel well. And those things also impact sleep, right? Can you maybe help us understand that relationship that you were talking about?
Yeah, it's a big tug of war, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of like, what do we do about this? How do we break the cycle? What we eat matters, and we know that during our day. It makes it harder to choose well when we're fatigued, let alone the chemistry is playing on our core source. If you've ever heard the sort of acronym HALT, the hungry, angry, lonely, tired, that's used sometimes in addiction. Sometimes I think the HALT, like stop for a second, and sometimes it's not mind over matter, but when we're thinking about is food going to solve this problem right now, and what kind of food might help me solve this, I think of the HALT as sort of symbolic, toward looking at why are we doing this? Is it hunger? Is it emotion? Is it just boredom? Or are we tired? And tired is increasingly part of our picture today. But I think that if I'm understanding right, that what we're finding is that, from your question, is that we know that fats and fiber, the fruits and vegetables, things that we love and to talk about, we know certain things that they do for us. They help us slow gastric emptying. They help modulate glucose and insulin. They help alter those gut hormones in a positive way. They help satiety and fullness and being satisfied. All of those can help ladder up to effective sleep and even falling asleep well. They're potent stimulators of satiety, of the satiety indicators of the peptides that our gut, produces as well. And they're important, especially when they come from plant-based sources that offer other nutrients in their matrix to be able to help this whole cycle. So I think when it comes to, a practical approach, when we get, clinical about it, we do have to tackle it both from all angles, right? I mean, we have to really think about what our sleep routine is, and maybe we can get into that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Like what is our sleep architecture? What's the sleep wind down? What does why are those important? And then importantly, where does the food aspect fit so that it can impel us to make smarter choices for sleep and energy during our days as well.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And what we eat during the day kind of sets us up for sleep at night. And there are a number of nutrients that are in whole plant foods: magnesium, tryptophan, folates, antioxidants that really assist in that sleep architecture and getting to sleep. Can
Yeah,
you maybe
exactly.
talk about some of that and some of the research around some of the foods that assist us in getting a better night's sleep?
Yeah. So when I think of the different kinds of factors that impact us, I mean, nutrients are a good place to look at it because we can look at different nutrients that we know to have some impact, like tryptophan, like folate, like sources, and we can look for sources of those in the diet. Magnesium, being nutrients that have been associated with not only plant foods, like avocados being a great example there, but also they can impact sleep, healthy sleep pattern, also circadian rhythm. So some of these things are nutrient based, and while we can't make a leap of cause effect on that, we can say, well, these nutrients do play a role in healthy sleep pattern. So that's one very important part of looking at the bigger picture of what kinds of foods and where do we find those and how can that impact in our day? Where do we insert those in our day? It's one of the most practical ways. So certain nutrients can impact sleep. Tryptophan, of course, is a precursor to melatonin. Folate is also involved in the production of melatonin. Magnesium, many people, athletes, many people use magnesium, take magnesium as a supplement, but use it in sports for muscle contraction, relaxation effects, which, if anyone has any issues with the restless leg at night, that impacts sleep heavily. I work with a lot of athletes that are very much impacted by that, but it can also help in the relaxation response. And there's different forms of magnesium that people utilize as a supplement, but food sources should always be first. So those are certain areas where nutrients play a role. Also, some of the research is looking at the long-term effects of healthy eating, so that consistency matters. And that's what we see with like the Mediterranean diet studies, and Mediterranean is like a style of eating, of course, and it originates around the Mediterranean, but we have that in the United States as well. We have those star features, and that food can impact sleep that night as well as over the long term. That's really, really compelling. Plus all those different healthy behaviors. So when we're looking at foods, there's some, research, the fruit and vegetable research, and hopefully we can, include that in the chat or Q&A. Some of the research that just came out. I started to mention it was e-published in June, and I was just looking back at the study in preparation for today, and I guess the official publication is October, so it's just about to be out officially, but it's been out for a few months now, looking at the positive association between fruit and vegetable consumption and sleep that just sort of adds to the body of evidence in that fashion. Another one that I want to highlight today, of course, because we are talking about the essential 8 and sleep, as well as bringing up avocados into the mix, which have a unique profile because they do have a source of magnesium and tryptophan and folate among 20 plus other vitamins and minerals and fiber and healthy fat. They were associated with healthy sleep using the essential 8. So a recent study that was done was looking at avocado consumption, an avocado a day and consumption, and using the essential 8, looking at the factors and risk of cardiovascular disease. What came out from this study, so it was a secondary outcome that was seen, was a relationship to sleep quality, as well as lipid quality and overall diet quality. So 3 big pluses, coming out of looking at the impact of avocado, which are the monounsaturated fat, fiber, they're a fruit, by the way, even though on the dietary guidelines, they consider a vegetable on the plate, they're technically a fruit. But it's interesting to see that specific foods are now being increasingly associated with sort of sleep indicators. And it compels us to do more research. I mean, that's not the end of the story. That's sort of just an interesting association that was found that was significant. And now, researchers will probably jump on in and say, like, what more? What can we look at very specifically clinically, maybe in a randomized controlled trial, and looking more closely at this?
Yeah, that's great. And 2 things in follow-up to that. Number one, I've had lots of patients say to me, Dr. Stoll, I'm concerned that, avocados are going to make me gain weight. So I want to address that. And maybe you can just talk about some of the research there, because avocados, like you said, have so many benefits.
Yeah.
And they really don't contribute to weight gain, but I want to just dispel that because
Yeah. Let's do some myth
Yes.
busting there. It's understandable. It's like you hear that, it's logical. We certainly lived through an era of just complete fat phobia in foods, and there is a difference between where you get the nutrients in your foods. And I think foremost, and then I want to point to some research that shows, contrary to that idea, that that food comes with a matrix. So food comes, like the whole food form comes with a matrix of nutrients. And often they actually work synergistically with each other and with other foods, by the way. You mentioned that kale and avocado before, that salad. I have a salad, I call it the wacky salad because it reminds me what's in it. It's walnuts, avocado, currants, kale, and yum, because I needed a Y to make it wacky. But for the very purpose that the avocado, and I'll get back to the weight piece here, but the avocado and the nutrients, in avocado, not to mention that they've got their own carotenoids, they help the absorption of the fat soluble vitamins from the other foods in that salad, and they actually increase not only the synergy, literally amplify the carotenoids from the kale and the carrots. Oh, I throw in carrots as well. That's another C, into that salad. But they help the absorption of vitamins A, E, D, and K, which, are critically important to human health. So, we know that like a food like an avocado has a matrix. They have a good source of fiber, number one. So when we're thinking of, what's the impact on health, on blood sugar, on overall health in general, we're thinking, I bet you know the statistic, but only about 6% of us are meeting our recommendation for fiber. So they've got a good source of fiber that contributes to that. And then they're a source of healthy fats. They're considered a healthy food because of their monounsaturated fats. But what's really interesting, and get this, and I want to be clear on this being 1 avocado a day. There was a trial a couple years ago. It was a 6 months randomized clinical trial where individuals were fed with no other intervention, either 1 avocado a day, a whole avocado, or no changes over the course of 6 months. And what they found, and this was over 1,000 individuals, is that the diet quality went up. And I would like to say no surprise there, but you know what? You need to have science to allow you to say things like that. The diet quality went up in these individuals, and there was no negative impact on weight or visceral fat. They added, I mean, that's not an insignificant, by the way, number of calories. It wasn't like an eighth of an avocado. It wasn't a third of an avocado, which is a serving or about 50 grams. It was a whole avocado a day. And they experience no negative effects on weight and visceral fat. And that's not the only study, but I feel like that's one that's, sort of most shocking and wonderful, and take it to your dinner table conversation to dispel a little bit of that
Yeah, that's
persistent
fantastic.
myth.
Thanks for that. That was beautiful. That was an elegant myth busting of so many myths that get spread about, the reductionistic approach to nutrition. The fat phobia, like you talked about, we can't eat fats, but we need fat in our diet. It's like 60% of our brain is fat. I always tell
Yes.
people, I laugh, I say, it's if people call you a fathead, say, thank you. Yes, I am. And so we need really good sources of healthy fat. And it's like you pointed out, which is so important, it's a matrix. It's the package of the food that matters. It's the avocado, it's the berries, it's the greens that not only contain those core macronutrients, but as you pointed out, it's the fiber, it's the micronutrients, it's the antioxidants, the polyphenols, the carotenoids that have this profound synergistic real-time effect on all the systems in our body.
Yes, I agree. And you know what? And we don't only eat one food. So, I mean, we're not talking, just to your point, we're putting them all together on the plate, in the salad, in those different places. So we're not, I mean, as much as I love avocados, I eat them with other things. I eat them on their own.
Put
You
them on
eat
our
them with
kale
the
salad.
crackers or avocado toast as snacks. You eat them in different ways that are enjoyable and bring other things along with them for the ride. So I think they can elevate, the entire plate.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's beautiful. I'm just going to insert a question from our audience because I think it's relevant here. We had a couple of questions. What is the amount of avocado consumption that aids in sleep?
Oh, well, you know what? I think there's more research that needs to be done. I'm sorry, I don't have a firm answer on that, and I wish that I did, but more research needs to be done. What I can say is that, the research that associated it with the Essential 8 study was an avocado a day, over the course of those 6 months, was looking at the positive association there. So that was the first. Again, that's not it wasn't the primary outcome. They were looking at cardiovascular risk and looking at all the factors, and that rose up as a significant association. But I think safely, most of us could consume an avocado a day. That is not a dose prescription recommendation. There's been other research, though, that look at the one avocado. One serving is a third of an avocado, 50 grams. And, it has to fit into a positive plant-based diet that supports your overall health. But it's an excellent question. We always want to know, like, how much. But I think it's affirming to know that we can eat it with consistency. I will tell you something fun about, eating it at night related to, late night snacking. And there was a study just recently about avocados that were consumed 60 to 90 minutes before bed. So by show of hands, you can do it just in the comfort of your home or wherever you're beaming in from. But show of hands, has anyone ever late night snacked? And about 80% or more of us do, according to research, by the way. And recently, I was on a national television show, and the host of the co-host for the day said, and 20% were lying. So I thought that was sort of a funny
watched that
comeback.
one. I saw that in preparation for this. See, I saw.
I don't know if that's true or not, but at least we know over 80% do say. And this research looked at consuming an avocado snack with carbohydrates. So it was like a snack as you might have before bed, compared to a similar macronutrient composition, but poor quality. Non-avocado as poor quality, simple carbohydrate fat source, versus a low fat alternative. And they found that the second meal effect, so get this one, the next day, so it wasn't directly about sleep, but the next day, the post-meal triglycerides were lower, statistically lower. And this is something very compelling about looking at our behaviors and timing. This is a before sleep activity that impacted the next day's lipids in the blood after your breakfast meal. And that's really fascinating. And that's one, there's a few different studies that are looking at what's called the second meal effect of certain foods. And that maybe it's not altogether timing that matters. Timing can matter, but the quality of what you put in at what time that really matters for our overall health.
Yeah, that's really wise. And I think that speaks to the dietary pattern over a period of time, as you mentioned earlier. And, our diet industry wants to make it so regimented and strict that we have to do certain things at certain times to get a certain outcome. But really, it's the quality of what we eat, breakfast, lunch, dinner, over the course of days that really impacts our health.
Right.
And we have a question just to kind of follow up on what you're saying about timing. So this Holly asked, what time of day is best for consuming avocados to aid in sleep? Is there a time that's better? Is it before bed, or does it really just during the course of the day?
Yeah, we don't know. I would say that, eating a healthy diet throughout the day, well timed. I've given talks on, does timing really matter? Is it arbitrary, the idea of 3 square meals and X number of snacks a day? And there is sort of a social history that we can look back to. It's pretty fascinating. It involves the light bulb, the invention of the car, getting out on the road and eating, and the farming culture, the agricultural culture. We don't know as in terms of the impact. What we do know is this most recent study, that looked at snacking pre-bed didn't have a negative impact, and it had a positive impact at, the next day on triglycerides. What we also know from several other studies about avocados and diabetes risk or cardiovascular disease or weight or some of the other healthy living topics like skin health, there's a little there, or gut health, there's a little there, that the active incorporation into the meal can help with satiety. The fiber contribution can help slow blood sugar release, that there's positive relationships that I would say argue a case for inserting it at meals and snacks, like throughout your day, well balanced. I hope that that's helpful.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Wendy. I'm going to pull in a few more of our questions, and I have more for you, but I think it's relevant right now. One of our attendees said, is there anything negative associated with eating avocados? While we're doing some myth busting.
Yeah, I don't know. To be honest, if someone doesn't like it, then I don't force foods on them. That there's a lot of creative ways to consume it. I don't know of negatives to consuming avocado. I mean that so sincerely. No, I can't see one. I don't know about allergies. I'm not informed about that. I think they're very low. They're certainly not one
Yes.
of the 8 that gets labeled on foods. I think that the likelihood of an avocado allergy is very low. I think that the positive nutrients from them, there's, no risk of overconsumption to my knowledge. And seriously, you would stop yourself naturally. You would be full before you could ever get to a point, in my opinion. Although, a guacamole is pretty good when it's well made. But,
Well, it's the
to
chips that always get you there,
overconsume.
right?
I'd be hard pressed to say a negative there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was just thinking back on my career, and I think you and I have at least 50 years of combined experience in this field. And I've never encountered anyone who was allergic or had any negative implications for avocados.
Yeah, and you would know better, Scott, but I don't think there's any contraindications with any kind of
No, none that
medication
I'm
or
aware
anything
of.
that I've
No,
ever read about. I'm not.
I agreed. I agree. Yeah, it's a beautiful addition. And so while we're talking about heart disease and avocados, Colleen asks, what are your thoughts about the impact of avocados? And we can maybe broaden it too, because
Yeah.
it's really not specific, but a plant-based diet and healthy lifestyle on heart disease. As you mentioned earlier, I think we'll broaden it out because it's a little bit narrow to just specifically talk about avocados, although there's some benefits. So maybe, a little bit of specificity around that idea of avocados and heart disease, and then we can broaden the answer to the 8 factors that the American Heart Association recognizes.
Sure. Well, I think that when it comes to cardiovascular disease risk. We know that a plant-forward, plant-based, plant-powered, all the different nomenclature that you can come up with. In fact, I like to use the names that the people I work with want to use, and then build it into their plate. It can be pescatarian, it can be vegetarian or vegan or plant-based or omnivorous with. You can always make it work, but the research really stands up at the inclusion of a wide and diverse diet that features plants prominently, lean proteins, and other sources. When it comes to fats, what's been shown, if we look at fats, and it's more than a decade and a half of sort of consensus and growing, is that instead of focusing solely on saturated fat being bad, the swap in or swap for some of the saturated fat of the unsaturated fat forms. Those would be the monounsaturated fats that come in avocados and olives and some nuts and different forms, as well as the polyunsaturated fats. And all foods that have fat, actually, they you might call it out as one. They have a combination of different fats across a spectrum. You can look at it on a chart and see what percentage, but the predominant being that. And polyunsaturated fats you see in nuts and seeds, inclusive of the ones that you find in fatty fish like salmon and mackerel and those, the omega-3s, or the seeds and walnuts, where those essential fats. It's been shown for cardiovascular disease risk reduction, for benefiting diabetes risk and cardiometabolic disease, for balancing a variety, even inflammation, creating an anti-inflammatory or tending toward a more anti-inflammatory state, gut health, that the more of those types of fats swapped in for, but in cardiovascular disease in specific, swapped in for the saturated fats is really the sort of general scientific consensus, and that they do matter very much.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Maybe we'll just finish up just a couple more questions. We have so many about avocados, and then we'll get back to sleep because we got a few more things to dive in on sleep. So, let's see. First, any tips for picking good avocados? We'll go with the simple ones.
Yeah. Well, one place I'll send you right away for that is the Love One Today website, because they've got a whole how-to there. But how do I? I've got a guy, and it could be a woman, but it happens to be a guy. His name is Alex, who delivers my avocados to my door. And I always order them a variety. He always says, "What kind do you want?" And I say, "Well, I want some that are green and firm so that I can ripen them on my own, and some that are, sort of, along their path so that they're ready to go." When picking avocados, it depends on, are you wanting ready for guacamole, or are you wanting something that you can have on your counter, or, believe it or not, in your refrigerator? You can sort of stall the ripening a little bit if you buy some that are not quite yet ripe, and they'll continue to ripen. They'll sort of stall in the fridge for a little while, and then you can bring them out on the counter for a couple days. But you pick them, they should be not soft to the touch, but like have a little bit of a give to them if you're buying them toward being ripe. You take a look at them. They usually look beautiful when you're purchasing in the store. You bring them home. You don't pop off, which I learned recently. Some people have been going around saying, "Oh, if you can pop off the little stem at the top, it might be an indicator that your avocado is riper." And I've been advised that is not what to do, because it actually then introduces oxygen, which will speed the ripening further. So that is not the indicator. Once you get them home, if it falls off or comes off easily, it might be an indicator that, it's about ready to go. But yeah, it's not that difficult. What I usually do, though, is I get a couple dozen and I have them constant rotation. So when I'm down to 5 or 6, I make a new order and they show up on my doorstep. I recognize that I'm a little bit spoiled in that way because I live in Southern California. But you can do this at the grocery store too, and having them in constant rotation, because they are a fruit that isn't instantly ready when you want it, unless you happen to have a store that, there are a few stores that will have like, here's your ripe, here's your ripe bin, and here's your, firm and green bin to choose from.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. That was very detailed. Thanks. Maybe last one, and then I have another question on sleep.
Okay.
And I can dive in on this one too.
Yeah.
What about individuals with gallbladder removal, cholecystectomy, and limiting avocados, and how to reintroduce them into the diet?
Yeah, why don't you start on that one,
All right.
Scott, and I can add a little color to it
Yeah, so what I know from the most recent evidence, 22 to 25, is that there doesn't appear to be any evidence that says restricting avocados or healthy plant-based fats is necessary after gallbladder removal. Obviously, it takes 12 weeks, 16 weeks to recover after a cholecystectomy, and reintroducing those in, a smaller degree is maybe advisable, but you can absolutely reintroduce avocados and plant sources of fat after gallbladder removal without any long-term issues. Typically, the problem comes with ultra-processed foods, greasy fats, fried foods, for multiple reasons. But the matrix, as you said earlier, of a food that contains fiber, antioxidants, minerals, phytochemicals, does not appear to have the same impact after a gallbladder removal.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's helpful for me in my practice with clients and patients as well. One thing that I know from individuals that I've worked with that just sort of sings in tandem with what you're saying, Scott, is that when you don't have your gallbladder anymore, of course, you don't have sort of the reserve storage tank of extra bile to help break down and emulsify the fats, but it doesn't mean that you have no ability to make bile. So really, it may be that the portions that you consume at a given time, you might consider that being how much fat is in the meal right now that I can handle well over the course of the day, as opposed to removing it altogether. And of course, then choosing high quality that comes with the matrix, which helps out the gut and the rest of your digestive process so you can best metabolize it. I don't know if you
Beautiful.
agree with
Thank
that,
you.
but that's how
That was
I'm sort of
that
approached
was a beautiful combined answer. I love it.
it.
Thank
Okay,
you, Wendy.
very good.
So let's go back to sleep for the last 10, 15 minutes of our time today, because there's and we can weave in more about nutrition. We have so many questions that are piling up in the
I'm
queue.
happy to hear that.
Uh,
I'll be
so,
happy to, anything that goes unanswered, I'll be happy to answer them after our time today. I'm very, very glad to do
oh,
that.
that's very generous. Thank you, Wendy. So I know that, let's talk a little bit about the practical recommendations for like a sleep reset. I'm in residency and, working 120 hours a week, Q2, Q3 call, not sleeping. And I come to see you and say, Wendy, I need help with a sleep reset. How would
Yes.
you advise me? Sleep hygiene, meal timing, nutrition, exercise, wind down routines. What does that look like if you're going
The
to give me
whole
some
nine
advice?
yards. Well,
Yeah.
yes. Well, it is multifactorial, so I think that we can all, sort of level set on it's not one thing. In fact, I always think of a person as the center of a wheel, and all the spokes are either all the healthcare team that's built around them, or in this case, you and your sleep. It may be a lot of different things working around you that's helping impact the goal that you're setting here. So there's no one magical answer, unfortunately, or I think fortunately, it can be customized, but there are some things that you want to consider to guide and to start monitoring. So one of the things, just even before I want to leap right into some practical tips, but sometimes people like groan when I say like, let's keep a food diary, or let's keep a sleep journal, or let's keep let's look at this. First of all, data on yourself should be fascinating, in my opinion. And second, it doesn't just set like you up for some kind of weight goal or some kind of like, a tedious routine that you're establishing, but it allows you and me with you to see patterns. You make discoveries that are incredibly helpful, not only for now, whatever your goal is, but that you can relate to later when you find and discover the things that work. You go back to those magical seeds that you've discovered, and you get to use them over time. But when it comes to the whole, the whole routine, I always, start with like, tell me about your sleep, like, because so many people have different experiences with sleep and will say, um, my sleep is terrible. They may have insomnia and be up long hours, or they may sleep well once they fall asleep, but have trouble falling asleep. Or they may get up to go to the bathroom 10 times, but be able to fall asleep, or be constantly groggy in the morning. I know there's so many different pieces, about sleep quality, duration, wakefulness, all of those. So we take a look at that. When you establish a sleep routine, you really have to start with creating like a sleep sanctuary. So that's one thing that I say, we have to create our space where we can actually be at ease. And, this isn't woo woo. This can tie right into, medical or clinical benefit, personal benefit by dealing with things like light, like digital devices, like scanning your room and seeing how many little red dot lights are like around your room, how many things are plugged in, how much distraction and noise is coming in from your environment as well. So it can be important to establish your space. And there's a lot of tips there. There's a lot more tips that I could provide to you, but like creating a sleep space and making it about sleep. There's an emotional side to that also, of sort of what I call leaving your worries at the door, like that you mentally start practicing, and don't expect that it's going to change overnight, because a lot of us deal with, high charged, high stressed lives, and you can't just, snap and it's fixed overnight. And it may not be fixed 100% of the time either, and that's okay. So some of that is the sleep sanctuary, that then we'll get to like the timing of your sleep and some other things. Another aspect is nourishing for nighttime. I call it like nourishing. So focusing on foods in the day, at your meals, but also as you're approaching the evening hours, that support healthy digestion and getting through some of the real heavy lifting of digestion before you put your head to the pillow. Because if you think of your digestive tract as that beautiful 27 to 30 feet from your mouth to your colon, it is constantly in motion, and it will do the work whether or not, you decide to lay down or not, because otherwise it becomes like poison, toxin, like if you don't metabolize your food, it's dangerous. So your body will do that for you. But it's important to, the first couple hours after you eat, or eat lighter at a certain hour, and give yourself a couple hours before you recline to get some of the active digestion done so you can have more restorative sleep. Focusing on foods that support your serotonin and your melatonin production is another step in that equation. So whether it's leafy greens, your legumes that have sources of magnesium, avocados, again, your nuts and seeds, um, can help set you up with the nutrients. Tart cherries, there's research on tart cherries. There's research, looking at precursors of melatonin and some tropical fruits. I mean, so that you can sleep smart and sleep well, and I mean wellness well, and with how you consume. And then maybe if you are craving a snack, if you need to balance blood sugar, if you're craving a snack, think of something like, the avocado study I mentioned, or something that would be high quality that might help actually with the next day effect even. So that would be two. And then number three, I would say create some kind of wind down ritual. You create your space, but we're not supposed to be watching bright light news or scrolling, seeing all the intense light, or even actively thinking and then turn off the light and, unplug, like, I mean, it just doesn't work that way. It takes time. So some people create, I create a rhythm, on how maybe it's a tea time, maybe you have an herbal tea, and there are some teas that might help, but that aside, the ritual of it, dimming lights, gratitude journals, like things that like ease the mind so you can kind of ease into a sleep mode. It helps the brain waves. I mean, this is what the sleep scientists, will dive more into, but it helps you shift gears, and it sort of just makes sense, right? So those are a few things, as far as like, how do you tackle the different elements um, of the design for getting healthful sleep.
And what about technology and, television shows before bed? How do we
Oh,
manage that? How does that impact sleep? And what's your recommendation?
yeah. Well, that's a big deal these days. I mean, I think the more stress inducing the programming is that you're watching, the more negative impact it will have on your ability to re get into a good rest state. People are looking more and more even at like the brain waves of what's happening, what's lighting up, in sort of that passive engagement. Many people sort of do, um, they leave the television on, or they scroll
Right.
well after they could go to sleep.
Or
Some have
they
called it,
sleep
what
with
is
the
it
TV
called?
on, right?
Yeah, so making a routine. I mean, TV can be great, binge watching can be fun of your favorite show, but I really think that, if you're struggling with sleep, it's something to deal with, right? Like if your sleep is great and you're doing great and you're healthy, no problem, and you continue what you're doing. If you're struggling with sleep, that's one of the first places that you should assess what is the timing and play with that a little bit. Like, when can I just create ease and joy to ease towards sleep? Because technology like that, especially some of the programming that people are compelled to watch late at night, um, definitely works in contrast to
Yeah, that's
restoration and
right.
rest.
Hyper stimulates the brain in the way that it's been created. So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. And sometimes we just stay up too long, we just like we're so
Yeah,
tired we can't turn it off, it's like
yeah, that's right. How did it get to be midnight, right? That's
yeah, exactly. When you could have, and those hours before midnight, if you can get to bed before midnight, can be so valuable to the quality of sleep as well. And many people are really pushing upward toward that
yeah, that's
midnight
right. That's that
new
regenerative
day.
window. That's right. We have a question here. Somebody asked, what do I do when I get up in the middle of the night and have trouble getting back to sleep? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah. There's a number of strategies that people have proposed and things that I've, just experimented with different clients. There's some thought that if your mind is really on, that you should, get up and go find, maybe part of your sleep routine is having a peaceful place where you can quietly with the dim light read. There's other ways of practicing meditation, and it doesn't have to be woo-woo meditation unless you love that, because I think meditation is really cool. But there's ways of engaging in easy thought where you can help yourself ease back into sleep, different types of, whether they're mantras or sayings or visual cues that you can work through. Um, I don't think that there's one solution for every person on that, but also recognizing, and someone said something really interesting recently, and that sort of level set this. Most of us struggle with sleep sometimes, I mean, there's not a perfect every night everyone sleeps sound, and sometimes recognizing that it's okay if, once in a while, if you're not able to sleep, can bring a peace of mind over you. And
Hmm.
sometimes by saying, I have some strategies that I'm working on, can bring a little peace of mind. Also, trying to keep your worries outside, and that is that's sort of like a practice, but saying, there's this great story. I don't have it pulled up and I don't want to paraphrase it for you today, but this great story about this carpenter that I've told over the years. It's a story, it's like a fable, but it talks about this carpenter who hangs his worries at the door,
Hmm.
at the door of his house. But I've sort of adapted that into hanging your worries at the threshold of your bedroom, and the idea being that once you cross over it, the worries aren't going away, but very often after a good night's sleep, they're a lot less than they were the night before when you rejoin them in the morning. And I just love the idea of, like, at the end of a day, you can't do more, I mean, so we need to sort of hang those up for the moment. You can revisit them in the morning, And quite often, if you get a good night's rest, they don't seem so insurmountable when you rejoin them.
Yeah, that's right. And I've gotten to the habit of just before I even get to my bedroom, taking 10 minutes to just write down everything that I need to write down for the next day or things that I need to think about the next day. And that's a really nice strategy, I think, what you're mentioning of hanging things, out before you go to bed. It's down on paper. It's a way that your mind kind of recognizes it's already been dealt with, and you'll pick
Yes.
it up tomorrow, and then you can, go to bed without those things on your mind.
Yes, I like that. It reminds me, Scott, I like that idea, sort of downloading to, like, all right, and now, I know what I'm going to tackle. It reminds me of two things. One, Stephen Covey, I think this is years ago. This is really like going back into my own brain space here, but I think he talked about, using the first minutes before you answer emails and getting up and everything, getting into your work to, sort of write down your intentions for the day, like making that list. But I like the idea of doing the night before. It also reminds me of a researcher that I worked under when I was doing my master's degree at UC San Diego. And he wrote so many books on political science. He was a political scientist. And he wrote so many books. And he told me, because I was active in writing, I'm like, how do you do it? How do you pick up where you left off? And this doesn't work for everyone, I promise you that, but he would leave one sentence unfinished every night. So he would pick up literally in the middle of a sentence the next day. That was his strategy. But what I love about it is it was a strategy. Like, it was like,
Right.
how do I get back into the warm up tomorrow? Well, I'm going to leave it off midway so that I can pick up where I left off. But again, he like had a conclusion, like a period on the sentence for the day, and said, now is the time to rest.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you, Wendy. We have some good questions here on sleep. I'm just going to try to get through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. Well, how about let's talk about sleep aids, herbs, maybe nootropics, and see what are your recommendations? Do you have any favorites? How should people manage those?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest advice on that is always supplement or herbal medicine selectively. Food. It's a food first approach, certainly. That in the absence of a quality diet with the matrix that we talked about, healthy plates. None of those other things, I think, will do the trick. They won't be the one and done solution because they're not. That's not the way that they're designed. And then I think it's very customized and individual and selective after that. Some people do great on small doses of melatonin, not every day, but they use them in sort of different cycles or the different nootropics or herbs. I mean, my husband has his doctorate in traditional Chinese medicine and herbal medicine and knows, quite way more than I do. So what I would do in that case is refer to the right and appropriate individual to talk about those things. When people come to me looking for, supplements, we talk about them. We first assess what people are on. I ask them to converse with their primary practice physician who knows their full medical history and their prescriptions. And then we can look together at different opportunities or what they're curious about. Because the thing is, it always has to be an open conversation in my book, because otherwise they'll go, very often, and this is no discredit, not to diminish any of the wonderful people in the world, but they'll go do what they want to do if they don't feel like they're heard. They'll seek it elsewhere. So I always have an open conversation. If I can, reference some of the tools that I have in my toolbox or different research on certain supplements and protocols. And as long as it's in tandem, in collaboration. So I'm a big collaborator, and I really think it's important to be very individualized about that when you're trying some of these things out.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Wendy. Um, Here's a good question. How do you advise menopausal women to prevent abdominal weight gain when they are not sleeping well? I'm assuming because of hot flashes and other challenges, and they're already eating a really good plant-based diet.
Yeah, it's so multifactorial again. Well, thankfully, number one, there's more attention to this now. So we're able to hear it and talk about it more. I just gave a talk on menopause in the workplace recently. Um, I used to say, and I'm not going to say my age now, but some years ago, I was working very often because of the environment I was in with primarily women who were of menopausal age or older. And I used to say, I've been through menopause more times than, and I was, in my young 30s. I've been through menopause more times than, a lifetime, dozens of times, because I was going through it with so many people live and real in person. Um, there's not an easy answer to that. Some call it, I think Dr. Pam Peake called it the menopot, like a colleague and friend of mine, the abdominal weight, the visceral fat that comes on from doing what you've always done really well. We have to change some things. And, I can't answer one person's, I apologize, and we can take this offline. One person's, give a one party solution for this across the board. But one of the things that we look at is like, even if you're doing everything really well, and that's what I find when your age increases, when the biological years pass, it takes a little longer, it's a little more work, and you can't do what you've always been doing. And some people have to just ride the storm a little bit and come out well. But even that is multifactorial because sleep becomes a big issue, whether it's symptoms or poor sleep, that can become a hurdle to being able to release the fat. If again, the ghrelin and leptin get disturbed and the blood sugar gets disturbed and the thyroid gets, and this is, more of the area of medical doctors, but what I hear, subclinical thyroid issues come to pass sometimes with menopausal women, sort of doing, tackling it from different angles throughout the day and recognizing that your body will work with you. And you might just have to change up a few different things than you thought before, because it's very hard. I mean, I recognize that. I want to acknowledge that. But there are ways, and I've seen many people come through it and they do just fine, even if you struggle for a few years of that aggravation.
Yeah, I think your point is really well taken. It's an opportunity for recalibration. We get to
Yes.
these different points in our life, and it's an opportunity to kind of relook at everything, recalibrate, realign, maybe make some changes, do some lab work. And when you do those things, you can navigate that period of life very successfully.
Yes. We were talking when we met prior, to today, and I told you a little bit about a mentor of mine who's 103, and she speaks on wellness, and she's considered the godmother of the spa world, Deborah Zake, and she always would reset her decades. She would like each decade she'd sort of do like a reset and a goal set for her decades. And, when she hit, I think it was like 80, 85, she had a fall and she started, maybe it was at 90, 85, 90, she started doing 5-year resets. That took that long for her to say, all right, maybe not 10 years, I'll do a 5-year reset. She hired a retired Navy SEAL to train her,
Wow.
slowly, but, consider this woman in her 80s. And she did these resets, not only for her, career path, but for her health herself. So she's real evidence, of that sort of pattern that you're saying, recalibrate, check things out, renew, get to know yourself again. Like, who am I today? I'm the product of these great things before, but who am I today? And what do I need to do now to get to the next place?
That's fantastic. I really like that idea. 10-year reset. That's incredible. I love that. Let's do 3 quick questions and we'll wrap it up. Somebody asked about restlessness at night. Is there any strategies to overcoming restlessness?
Oh, yes. Well, I think I don't want to oversimplify this, but I really think looking to your diet during the day, as well as your exercise and mindfulness routine, all of those in tandem can help with restlessness. Now, restlessness can be in the brain, mental, and restlessness can be physical, muscle. So that's where I'm thinking of, part of this being movement and how you engage the day. Um, I think being well hydrated helps with sleep. And I think that many people are living semi-dehydrated. And I really see, and this may seem peculiar, and I don't have science to show this, but I've seen anecdotally that if people start hydrating, that their body I mean, it's sort of a common sense thing. Your body is flowing, your circulation is coursing, your heart rhythm, like everything is pumping more steadily. I feel that sometimes settles the body, because if our body's calling out for hydration and it's not there, it can't be easy to sleep. We're needing it constantly, and you need enough to get through the night. I think timing of your eating is really important, so your digestion gets into a rhythm. Our body will do what it has to. It's so resilient. I mean, we've got all these backup systems for all the nonsense that we pull on it. But the more regular and routine you are, the better your body then, when it's supposed to be resting, it will do what it's supposed to be doing, instead of trying to navigate all these other assaults of daily living that it's trying to clean up or pick up or get done before the rush of the morning. I mean, because let's be clear, our body's trying very hard to put up with us, and put up with us well. And then, engaging in practices during your waking hours that can help work on easing the mind, like practices that maybe then you can practice in the night, because it's hard if you don't practice it when you're alert, to be able to call on something when you're feeling foggy or sleepy and you're feeling restless, and working on some of those as well. Exercise can help in that, you can work some of the stuff out in the muscles. It processes so much during the day. It helps with all the benefits that we know, but the muscle contraction, relaxation, all of that can help you rest well also. So if restlessness is part of that, if that's part of the piece, then that can help as well.
Yeah, that's great. It is really a comprehensive review of those factors that can impact sleep, including caffeine and stress and all those other addictions. So
yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Of course. I mean, that's really important to do a caffeine sort of check on yourself, because it sneaks into the diet. I mean, I can't say how many people don't realize that some of the foods that they have in their diet, let alone what time they stop consuming. It's not just the obvious, but different bars and drinks that you wouldn't expect have caffeine or guarana or stimulants in them these days. That's a really good point, Scott. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Thank you. Gosh, we have so many questions, and we're kind of coming to the end. I'm going to ask one more because it's an interesting question, and we'll finish with this one. How do you increase your REM sleep?
Oh, you know what? I'm afraid I'm not the best one to answer that, Scott, but I would say that all of these habits, approaching your rest and restoration hours with a mindset toward what are the choices during my day that can set me up to have good energy during my day, but aimed toward a restful night, can be a good way to go. So I think that eating produce with every meal, like eating the rainbow, or having a fruit and or vegetable at every meal, hydrating through water sources. You get hydration from your coffee and tea, but watch the caffeine, of course. You can get it from your soups and salads. Hydrating, the timing of your sequence of meals, those all help you navigate your blood sugar, your insulin response, your weight management, your ability to be active and energetic during the day. And then the other lifestyle factors that we talked about that support all health, can help toward that. And then I really think, those few things that I mentioned about creating your own version of a sleep sanctuary, if you'll permit me that word, how we nourish our nighttime, and then creating a wind down routine whereby you can sort of set yourself up mentally to have your body do good rest.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a beautiful answer. It is that, sleep architecture is really driven by the lifestyle that's mostly outside of the bedroom, and then few of the things that we do, cutting out the light and all those other beautiful things you mentioned about creating that sleep sanctuary. Wendy, thank you. This has been so amazing. We have so many questions. We could go on for another couple hours, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and especially yours. And please thank your family for sharing you with us today. We really appreciate that. And I just want to appreciate the breadth of knowledge that you bring and all of the many years that you've spent investing in yourself so that you become an incredible resource for so many people. Thank you.
Grateful, and thank you for sharing a few of your waking minutes with me today. Very relevant and really meaningful. It's what I love to do. I think that we're better together, and that's what I firmly believe. And I'm appreciative to everyone who attended, and especially to you, Scott, for sort of leading the charge on such a meaningful conversation for me too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Wendy. And I also want to thank Avocados Love One today for supporting Plantrician Project, our conference, and this educational webinar. This is meaningful education that goes out to so many people. And a special thanks to you all at Avocados Love One today. And Jill always asks me to give you just a little question to put into the chat so we can just find out what you learned from today and how we interacted with you. And so before we go, and as I'm closing, if you'll just put into the chat one key takeaway that you learned today that you're going to maybe implement in your life to improve your sleep or improve the quality of your diet in the next week. Those help us to realize, what's important and maybe how to develop future content. So just take about 30 seconds and put that in the chat. And as we wrap up, I just want to invite you all again to the HELP conference. It is a beautiful conference, and it is in Jupiter, Florida, on October 10th through the 12th. We'd love to have you join us. Watch for more information on the Power of the Plate conference coming up in May, June of 2026. That's right, we're shifting the dates of our conference. It's going to be a little earlier in the year, which we're excited about. And I'm telling you, you don't want to miss this conference. It's the first in an evolution of a conference that I believe is going to reach around the world in many ways. So please join us for that first one in May, June. More information will be coming out probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And again, join us at plantricianproject.org for all of the free resources, including our potluck guide. That's one of my passions, encouraging people to start plant-based potlucks in your community. We just had ours a week and a half ago and in Nashville, and I love it, and I want to encourage you to do the same. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks for all these great notes in the chat. We appreciate each of you. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you partnering with us. And as Wendy said, this is a collaborative effort to change our families, our homes, and our communities. One bite, one action, one choice at a time. Thank you, Wendy, for being with us. Thank you again, Avocados Love One today, and a special thanks to the Plantrician staff. God bless you all. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.